Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my neighbor trespassed on my property and cut trees worth over $315,000 on my land. Here is what happened. The first one starts like this. My family has owned a large area of land for longer than I know. I think it used to be used for farming or something, but over the generations we just did not need that much space anymore. The property looks much smaller than it is because of a lot of trees taking up space that nobody has used in many years. We still fully own that land, we just let it kind of be a small forest. Our only other option would be to sell it, and we don't need the money and enjoy having our own little area of forest. The trees in that area are just not any ordinary trees, but they have some high value. We have been offered multiple times by people wanting to chop down a few of the trees to get some nice wood to use instead of having to pay out of pocket for it. We don't believe in cutting down healthy trees that pose zero threat though. We might own the land, but we believe that the animals kind of own those trees since it is their homes. Now, despite it seeming like we just leave that area alone, we actually very often go around and make sure everything is okay. Again, if anything was to go wrong and we didn't see it, we could get in a lot of trouble since it is our responsibility to take care of it. One day my brother noticed that a tree was down and obviously it had been cut. It was too perfect to just be a break, and the more obvious thing was the rest of the tree was simply gone. We found 3 more trees like that and figured that somebody was coming onto our land and cutting down the trees for the wood. This is a pretty rural area and things are handled a little differently than in other places. Some might call the cops, but we did something else. We set a net trap to catch whoever was sneaking onto our property. Our uncle is crazy smart and was able to wire it so once the wire was tripped we would get an alert and be able to go there. Nothing wild and big lived there, so only a human could realistically trip the wire. 2 days later the alert went off and we jumped onto our ATVs and drove out to the forest area. In the net was a man screaming his head off for another guy to get him down. One of these men I knew as my neighbor who had asked to cut down the trees and got denied in the past. They had tools with them and it was clear as day what they were doing. We caught them red-handed and my uncle started recording as me and my brother were asking them questions and kind of interrogating them. Me, what are you guys doing out here? Brother, yeah, you know, we own this land, plus you never know what kind of crazy traps you might find wandering in areas you don't belong, huh? Neighbor, shut your mouth and get me down from here. This is assault. We did cut him down per his request. Me, you wouldn't have gotten in that mess if you were not trespassing on our property. Neighbor, well, you shouldn't be trying to set things up to hurt people either. Man, yeah, if you got hurt, we could have probably sued you for millions. Brother, that's some nice equipment you got there, the exact stuff needed for cutting down trees. Neighbor, cut the crap. You cannot just hawk all the nice wood and not expect us to come and get our fair share. That's called being greedy. Man, besides we only cut 3 so far, so you have more than you can count. Me, actually it's called trespassing and destruction of property, possibly even theft. I suggest you get off my property now before I have the sheriff and his guys come and force you off. They then left, but if you think I dropped it at that, you're wrong. I didn't know exactly how much those trees or their wood was worth, but I knew that it was a lot. We were gonna sue them for trespassing on our land, cutting down the trees and hauling them away for profit. First is we needed to find somebody that could tell us exactly what the trees they cut down were worth. Without that we wouldn't know how much to sue them for it. It took a couple of weeks, but we eventually found somebody to come and take a look. We expected maybe a few thousand per tree, but nope. Each tree was worth about $70,000, and once you take and process the wood, it's worth even more than that. An estimate of $315,000 total. I knew that he probably didn't have that much, but I was gonna sue him for everything I could. If he didn't know it was my land or the trees were worth money, it might be different. However, the fact that he knew and was told no beforehand made me feel zero sympathy for this jerk. Before that trial was able to happen, the first trial for the criminal charges happened. One key thing we had was the video my uncle took where they flat out admitted to cutting down 3 trees and coming back with the intent to cut more. With that, we were able to prove trespassing, destruction of property and theft in a large sum due to the amount the trees were worth. Now, normally for something like this, I'm pretty sure that he would just get a warning. However, due to the high value of the trees, it went from low crime to something considered more serious. He got a year in prison. Meanwhile, his friend had a bunch of issues previously and was on probation and got sent to prison for like 5 years. As for my civil lawsuit against him to get the money, it was as easy as taking candy from a baby. That video evidence plus the appraisal for the trees made the entire thing pretty much open and shut. He did want somebody else to look at the trees to prove I wasn't pulling anything, but the second guy said the same thing as the first one. He did not have that much money to give me, so he lost his home and property in the attempt to pay me back. In the end, I got roughly half of what the trees were worth, but I was pretty happy about it. When he gets out of jail, he won't have a property to come back to, so I guess that he isn't my neighbor anymore. The only question for me remains what I should do with the money. I had an idea of using it to buy his old land and just make another forest area filled with trees. None of us need the land, but it might be pretty funny if nothing else. Maybe some of you can tell me if you think that would be a good idea or just a total waste of everything I got. And here, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support me. And the next one is titled Fired and Got Revenge. For the background, I used to work at a fast food restaurant whose logo is a cowboy hat. And by the way, whoever can figure out which fast food restaurant he's talking about gets a cookie in the comments. Anyway, I worked there for 6 years and got myself up into a management position. I was not the GM, but I was the night closing manager with a pretty awesome team. I love them to death and I still talk to them fairly often. However, as with all fast food places, the turnover is kind of high, so I ended up getting a new person on my shifts. I hated this entitled little douchebag. He wore it on his sleeve that he only got this job because his parents made him, which yeah, I get it, it's fast food, no one wants to stay there forever. But at least pull your weight and be good to your coworkers instead of being half-assed. And honestly, he was negative, mean to his coworkers, mean to the guests, and an absolutely disrespectful prick to all forms of management, including me. We will call him Jay from now on. Some days would be pretty lightly staffed, so I would end up closing the lobby of the store since it closed about an hour before the drive-thru closed. Which means that my register would be the one that took all the lobby traffic, which meant that Jay would be on drive and I would have a wonderful woman, we will call Dee, on the back line. She was so nice and working with her is an absolute treat. We had no cameras in our store, so when my register came up short on numerous shifts, it was assumed that I was the culprit. However, I was not. I was also fired on the same day that Jay came in with brand new beats that cost about the same amount of money as when missing. I was totally pissed, so for a couple of months after that I would come in right before the dinner rush with my roommate. Jay was moved to lobby closes. Perfect. I would go into the girls' bathroom and pick the lock to the toilet paper dispenser and throw all of it into the trash bin. Then I would do the same with the paper towels, all of this while my roommate was doing the same thing in the men's room. Then we would get a concrete slider and go home. We did this about a dozen times. I was never caught, but Dee told me that Jay got chewed out multiple times for it. Then he got caught smoking weed in the freezer and got fired. And the next one is a biker revenge story. My friend and I rode our bikes into town. There were only a few designated areas for bikes. A car was parked in the middle of the clearly marked bike bay, only 2 spaces available, one at the front, one at the back, and we put our bikes in those 2 spaces, and on the way to the shop we spotted a traffic warden, told her about the car and she put a ticket on it. 10 minutes later we returned to our bikes and the driver is waiting by her car. She starts yelling at us about how petty we were for blocking her in. We ignore her and I say to my friend, "I'm thirsty, I need a coffee." As we are talking, she's still ranting, traffic warden number 2 writes her a ticket and we go off for a coffee. 20 minutes later again we return to our bikes and by now she is red in the face angry and she starts screaming in our faces about how she could just run over our bikes. My friend is only 5'5" and started talking to her calmly. "That would be a mistake. If anything happens to our bikes, we would know it was you. You've already got 2 tickets. She cut him off. She rang the police claiming that 2 big bikers were threatening her, a lone female. The police arrived within minutes and in numbers, and they separated us, heard our version of events, the truth, and the police believed us. One of the police officers spoke to us, but loud enough for her to hear, "You lads have had some stress. I don't want either of you riding your bikes. Go for a walk, grab a coffee." Meanwhile, another police officer is giving her a ticket. 40 minutes later, we return to our bikes just in time to see traffic warden number 2 issuing another ticket, no idea where she was. Only went to town to buy some paint, meant to be only 5 minutes. She ended up with 4 fixed penalty tickets. And the next one is titled, "Am I the jerk for spending time with my daughter?" For over a decade, myself and my 4 best friends have had an annual fishing trip. There's always been a no wives, no girlfriends rule since the beginning, and no one has ever violated it. 2 years ago, my friend Tim told the group he wanted to bring his 5-year-old son to sort of pass the tradition on to the next generation. At that point, only Tim and I had kids, but my daughter was 3 and too young for fishing. We all supported Tim's idea and made a big deal over the little guy. He had a great time and came last year as well. My other friend Randy has a 4-month-old son now. When the baby was born, Tim gave Randy a children's fishing pole to give to his son on his 5th birthday. So it seemed clear to me that the tradition had evolved to us plus our kids, which I'm cool with. I mentioned to my friends the other day that my daughter was excited for this year's fishing trip and they looked at me like I was crazy. Tim said I shouldn't bring her and I was baffled. I was super supportive of him bringing his son. This is no different. My daughter is now the age of Tim's son was when he first came on the trip. Another friend brought up the no wives, no girlfriends rule, which pissed me off. My 5-year-old daughter is not anyone's wife or girlfriend. I said if they don't want my daughter there, then I don't want Tim's sons there. Tim was offended and stormed out. Randy said what I said was uncalled for. I said I'm bringing my daughter and that's that. I just want to make sure I'm not being an entitled prick. So Reddit, am I the jerk here? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about this in the comments. But personally, I would say OP is definitely not the a-hole, and this is sort of a double standard that is being done here by his friends. If one person can bring his son, obviously OP can also bring his daughter. But then again, if this is such a toxic environment, maybe it's not the correct environment for his daughter. Anyway, one comment on the Reddit thread said, not the a-hole, but if that's the kind of reception your daughter will be subjected to by your friends, you might just want to bring her fishing by yourselves. She will probably enjoy that a lot more than she will being looked at by your friends like she is biologically lesser than them. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. If I were you, I would ditch their trip and take your daughter on a fishing trip on one-on-one. Clearly when they said no wives, no girlfriends, they meant no females. Really lame that they, as fathers themselves, are not more understanding and supportive of you wanting to bring your daughter. Update to the story. I sent this post to my friends and we talked some more. They ended up apologizing. Daughter is definitely coming on the trip. I know many people assume that my friends are sexist and horrible, but they are really not. They were just worried that with my daughter there, we would have to stay at a hotel instead of the usual cabin and not be able to do as many activities, but I assured them my daughter can sleep without air conditioning as easily as Tim's son, and they are going to be the ones having trouble keeping up with her 5-year-old energy. Everyone apologized for bringing up the no wives, no girlfriends rule and agreed that was a crappy thing to say. It's all good now. Thanks for your support. And the next one is another petty revenge story. Servers get a lot of crap from entitled customers, and I understand that. I don't need to be treated like some deity just because I'm purchasing food, and usually I will chalk up dismissive and terse behavior as someone else's bad day. It happens to everyone, but this one was different. Myself and 7 friends went to a sports bar for chicken wings, all of us being around 21 years old. Our brash waitress demanded our IDs before we could even sit down, which is 100% her job to ask for, but her attitude was already abrasive. We complied and ordered drinks and wings, and everyone's interaction with the waitress was rude and abrupt, but again, people have bad days. About 15 minutes later, most of us had finished our first beer and wanted to order another one, but she is nowhere to be seen for the entire duration of our meal. Fine, I guess we will just finish our food and leave since further service is clearly not happening. When our plates are empty, she comes back with one check and proceeds to hover around the table with her arms crossed, glaring at us while we figure out the nightmare, which is splitting a check 8 ways with cards and cash and who will cover who, etc. She is making us uncomfortable, and so I say to her in what I think was a fairly nice tone, "Hey, this is gonna take us a while to split the check. Could you come back in a couple of minutes?" To which she responds, "You don't have to be rude about it." Well, I wasn't, but now I am. The 8 of us agreed this had gone too far. We paid the bill exactly in cash, so there was no chance she could write in her own tip on someone's card receipt, left a pile of money, left exactly 1 penny on top for the tip, and walked out never to return. This person was hands down the nastiest server I've ever had and the only person I've gone out of my way to tip below 15%. Having a bad day is one thing, being an a-hole is another. And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Do you think that OP was in the wrong here or in the right? I am very curious about what you have to say. Honestly, I go to a lot of restaurants here in Thailand and I never had to treat a server like this. However, I have to say, if the server is bad, I can imagine that it really destroys the mood and can ruin your day. Anyway, the next one is titled, 2 older ladies made my life hell. So I work in a regional grocery store chain as a cashier, and this morning I was ringing an old lady up. She was very pushy and demanding during her order, but I just ignored that since a lot of customers are like that. However, when I got to the end of her order, she asked what her total was and I read it to her. And she said she could not hear me. So I raised the volume of my voice a bit and she said she still could not hear me and actually started making fun of me for having a quiet voice. It's worth noting that I have a lung condition that makes it physically difficult and painful to raise my voice. So I tried one last time to raise my voice a bit more so that she could hear me, and it makes my voice come out sounding strained since it is physically painful for me to do so. And then she just kind of stops and stares at me for a second and then goes, "You know, I don't think you're supposed to talk to your customers like that, young lady." And the lady in line behind her, a middle-aged lady who just showed up right as this was happening, goes, "Yeah, that was super uncalled for. I did not like that. That was hostile." And I am legitimately super confused and startled because genuinely did not mean for it to come out that way and did not even think it came out that way at all. I did not yell or act snippy or anything, I just spoke up a bit louder in a genuine attempt to get her to hear me. And I tried to explain myself and apologize, basically, "I'm really sorry if that came across as rude, ma'am. I promise I didn't mean it that way. I have a problem with my lungs that makes raising my voice painful, and I really apologize if my tone sounded curt. I really didn't mean it." And she just looks at me and goes, "Oh gee, well I'm sorry for being alive. I mean, wow, sorry I bothered you, right?" Super sarcastically, and rolls her eyes at me, and the lady behind her backs her up, glaring daggers at me, going, "Yeah, no, that was not okay. That was really wrong. Seriously, what's your issue?" And the two of them keep ganging up on me and telling me off like that for a while and treating me like I had just slapped the older lady across the face or something. And I cannot help it and just start tearing up and crying right there. Only then do they both stop and it's like they both suddenly realized they were talking to an actual human being with emotions because they both immediately backed off, started apologizing, promised not to tell my manager and tried to reassure me. It's just... do people like those two forget they are talking to people when it comes to retail workers, or do they just not care until they have to see the consequences of what they say and do? And yeah guys, nowadays working in retail is definitely something I would not want to do anymore. It can be interesting for a while, but it seems like people have zero empathy nowadays, so I definitely wouldn't want to work there. Anyway, the next one is titled, "I guess we cannot fire you." When I sold cars, we had a really nice showroom with large glass windows, and one day I was tasked with moving a powerful V8 sports car, which was in the showroom. I was supposed to reverse the vehicle into position. However, the floor had just been mopped. I put the car in what I thought was reverse, manual transmission. When I started to let up the clutch, I felt the wheel slip, so I thought, oh, the floor is slippery, just give it a little bit more. So I give it a little bit more and the car launches forward into the large glass pan. Thank God it was a hardtop. When this happened, I freaked out, let go of the clutch and the car had enough power to break the glass pane. This was right before opening. The glass pane was massive, that extended maybe 20 feet wide and 20 feet tall. I'm not sure, it was huge. All of this right before opening on a Saturday. I get called into the GM office who asks me for the facts. I tell him what happened and he asks me if I'm okay with doing a breathalyzer, and I agree. I had not been drinking that morning or the day prior to I passed. He said, well, you're sober, so that's good. I go, yeah, I am. This was just a stupid, dumb mistake. And he goes, yeah, it was. I ask, so I'm fired? He laughs, you're too expensive to fire now. I ask, what do you mean? He goes, do you know how much it's going to cost me to replace that glass pane? I go, a lot I imagine. Yeah, probably more than the car you used to drive through with it. I go, oh wow. So I go, so I'm not fired? Oh hell no, I know you will never ever do that again from now on. You're in charge of moving cars inside the showroom, and now get back to work. And then I went back to work. I personally refused to move cars in the showroom for about a month or so, and eventually I started doing it again and did not have another accident. The next one is titled, Nope, we won't give you the contact info. Medium used to sell cars. My auto group had a policy that we don't give non-customer facing employees contact details and yes, even their company information. FYI, we have this policy because years ago, a customer went completely irate on two of our title clerks and it caused issues. Also, those people do not fully understand, nor do they have the time to understand all the aspects of the customer requests. They, who shall be referred to as admins, do very good work. So, a customer loses some important document that he needed for his vehicle. He then comes to me, his salesperson. I tell him, yeah, I can send that up. He goes, I know you're busy, let me do it for you. I said, I'm sorry, I cannot give you the admin's contact info. Why not? I explained that we have a rule against giving our non-customer facing employee contact information, that I will send up his request and we will work on it. He tells me, I'm a paying customer, I want to deal with those people directly. I go, I'm sorry sir, but I cannot let that happen. To which the customer says, let me speak to your manager. I said, fine, I called up my sales manager, no answer, my GM is walking by, I run out and tell him. He goes sure, he comes in, gets the same story I've already given him, and my GM says, I'll tell you what, I'll personally go to the admin and try to get this done for you. To which the customer said, I want their email address. To which my GM said, I'm sorry sir, but we do not give out non-customer facing employees contact info. Customer frustrated goes, well, that's a stupid rule, who made that one up? My GM said, I'm the one that made that rule up. Customer sitting there, it's dawning on him, he has hit the top of the chain of command. So I'll just have to wait? My GM said. Yes, and trust me, I want you to have the best experience possible, so we will do what we can to fix this. FYI, the problem was the customer's 5-year-old son threw the folder with all the ownership documents into his fireplace, so it was not exactly our fault. In the end though, we got duplicates made. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.